Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Many Tribes, One Kingdom. It's your good friend John here for another video, and as always, we are joined by our good friend and sometimes very annoying friend.
Hey, it's Dustin, and I just want to note one quick thing. My room just lit up as soon as I started hitting record button, like the sun just started brightly shining in here.
Oh.
I know, right? It makes you think that. It's good to see you guys again. It's been a little while since you've seen my face, and you've seen John's face more recently than mine. So we are back with another episode of Many Tribes, One Kingdom. And John, what is our topic for today?
So today,
before we hear about the topic, I need you guys. If you're brand new, I need you to subscribe, like, and comment down below. And if you found it very funny for me to cut him off, just please comment down below, and I won't do it as often as I did.
He planned that.
Actually, I didn't. I just remembered, but I was like,
silence. All right. So today's video, we thought it would be important to give you guys an overview of the Old Testament.
Yes, the Old Testament.
So what we'll do is we'll summarize the story, the history, and then we will discuss the importance of the Old Testament. Sounds good?
I think so. I think that's what we agreed upon. Look, I'm a donkey. Meow, meow, meow.
That sounds about right for Dustin. Okay, so let's start with the very beginning in Genesis. And everybody knows this story. In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. We see the creation week where God makes each thing, and after he makes each thing, he says it is good. So, and that all ends on the sixth day with his capstone creation, man, which he makes in his own image before resting on the seventh day. So let's pause right here real fast and talk about it for a second.
So let's unpack this. So obviously we could tell that God is doing something amazing. Each one day, he's doing something great to create something, and to form the entire world. And then on the sixth day, God creates man. Now, while man, during its initial stage of man and beforehand, when between animals and man, everything on Earth was a herbivore. They didn't eat. They didn't eat each other. They just ate plants. And that seems very weird, but that's how it was before creation, because there was no death.
Yes, there was no death. Man was created immortal. Both Adam and subsequently Eve were created with immortality. They couldn't age and they couldn't die.
Right. And what about the animals?
Same with the animals. It seems that the animals were also just as immortal, because we later on read that, death does not enter the world till later. And so this world looks perfect, doesn't it? God even caps it all off at the end by saying it is very good.
Yeah, so what is significant about this point of history?
Well, I can point out one thing significant is that we don't live in this part of history anymore.
Well, the significant part of this history is that they are in constant communion with their creator. God and creation are in perfect
sync.
Perfect union.
Yes.
And it all leads up. But here's the caveat. Man has free will, and oftentimes when man has free will, temptation comes along the way to do the wrong thing. And unfortunately,
that's what happened.
And a being that had came before, who had fallen before, had come back to deceive man so that sin and death can enter into the world. And we see this part of the history, when they ate the fruit of the forbidden tree. And then there it goes. Literally, it starts from that point. Death enters into the world, carnivores, eating of other animals, and murder all entered into the world.
Just pure lawlessness, From there, of course, and we're going to give a brief summary. From there, of course, man and his wife are removed from God's presence. They are removed from Eden.
Mm-hmm.
The earth falls under the curse of death and decay, and all of their children begin. We see from the very beginning, their children start to struggle. Cain kills Abel. And this all culminates in such a period of lawlessness and sin that God has to wipe the slate clean and flood the earth.
Well, not entirely clean.
Not entirely clean. No, because he preserves one family, and that's Noah. I wish we had some pictures we could show.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not at that. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. But anyway, yes. So God preserves man and the animals through Noah, his family, and the ark, where he takes on the animals.
And let me say this real quick, because I know somebody out there is going to say it. No. There was no such thing as unicorns. They did not forget to get on Noah's Ark. There's no such thing as unicorns. I'm going to dismiss that right now because I know someone's going to say it.
Actually, there is an extinct species of rhino that is called unicorns. What? I'm just saying.
The mythological unicorn.
I know.
Smart aleck.
That's for cutting me off. After the flood, then God establishes, God commands Noah and his descendants to spread out and fill the earth. And almost immediately, man just continues to rebel. And we see this in Genesis 11 with the construction of the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
This rebellion of, okay, well, God tells us to spread out, so we're going to congregate together. God wants us, to subdue the earth. No, instead, we're going to try and connect with heaven. So at this point, this is where languages enter the scene. This is where God divides the languages. And from here, we stop following the whole human race, and we specifically follow one family, and that's the family of Abraham. And we're going to follow them for the rest of the Old Testament.
Well, first off, how come man cannot enter back into the Garden of Eden?
Well, the Garden of Eden would have been destroyed in the flood.
Maybe. It may have been protected too. But what was the critical thing that God did to protect Eden?
Oh, he placed a cherubim with a flaming sword at the entrance.
Yes, and this is the part of theology that I love to know. The cherubim, it is believed the cherubim were the highest ranked warrior among the angelic hosts. So yeah. He literally, it's like sending a member of the royal guard to protect this place. Like, you got the best protection.
I mean, they got 4 faces. You're not going to be able to sneak up on them.
No. And, a flaming sword, I mean, ooh.
No, thank you.
No. anyway. So yes. So Eden is protected. And so and that's why you don't see anybody dare to ever go near or to even attempt to find Eden, because they know the terrifying nature of the angel that's standing there. Because remember, every other time they see an angel, what do they say? Do not fear.
Yeah. So now we're following Abram and his wife and their descendants. So we did a video on Abram. Huh?
Sorry, that was my bottle.
Oh, sorry. We did a video on Abram a couple months back. To briefly summarize, Abram was a man whom God called to be his servant, to live righteously, and God would create a nation through him. You know him more by the name God gives him, which is Abraham, and his wife Sarah. And together they have Isaac eventually. And Isaac goes on to have Jacob and Esau. And from Jacob and Esau, well, Jacob specifically, we get the 12 tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're gonna kind of move a little quickly for the next couple of things. So from Israel goes down into Egypt to live,
mm-hmm.
and then they become enslaved by the Egyptians. And Dustin, what kind of happens here? So this is where we actually end Genesis. This is where Genesis ends.
Mm-hmm. Well, again,
so what happens next?
So we see the era of the plagues occur.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the era. I'm sorry. That seems like a long time. No.
Yeah.
We see this point in history where there's plagues, and the interesting note about these plagues is that they each attacked the beliefs of one god or a couple gods of the Egyptian pantheon, which sort of demoralized all of the Egyptians.
Yes.
And so Moses goes to confront Pharaoh, and Pharaoh eventually does let the Israelites go. However, he changes his mind again and chases after them. And in the Red Sea, as when Israel's finally get to the other side after Moses parts it, then God causes the sea to fall right back down on the Egyptian army and Pharaoh and drowning them. But interesting to note, they recently found horse bone and shields in the Red Sea.
Yes. So from here, Moses leads the Israelites to Mount Sinai. And we're going to stay at Mount Sinai for a minute because let's go over the Levitical law now. This is where God hands down the law that the Old Testament is full of.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dustin, what's the significance of this? What's the significance of God giving laws to man here on earth?
Well, it is to bring them back into a right relationship. But it's not, now don't hear what I'm not saying. It's not to bring, it's not to cause any change. And the law does not save you, no. But it teaches you how to live upright, to live according to, living according to God, living according to what he wants. And,
yes.
And most people will attribute that to today, that being the moral law. I'm sorry, being the moral law of today. And so that's where we get that from. And the Levitical law, you see mostly wrap around, and being taught by the priests of the Levitical order who followed, or who are the descendants of of Levi. But
which Moses was.
Right. And so the Levites had to keep this law, but also teach the law to the others, so that everyone else can live upright and righteous lives in the face of God, so that they can stay in that right relationship with God. But as we know, as the song of story, this is where it sort of begins, the rise and fall many times of Israel.
Yes. So Moses passes away and Joshua takes over. And Joshua leads the Israelites on a grand conquest of the Promised Land. Mm-hmm. And we do see the Israelites fail even here, in chapter 7 of the book of Joshua. Achan takes some things from Jericho that God had specifically ordered the Israelites do not touch anything from Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
And then in chapter 9 or 10, I do not remember which one it is, the Israelites actually make a covenant with the Gibeonites, they were not supposed to do that. They did not seek God on this. And they messed up again. And this is not just a one-time thing. This is, as Dustin said, this is a continual process, because after Joshua dies, the Israelites do not finish the conquest, and it just gets worse. Mm-hmm. This is where we enter the period of the judges.
Now, who are the judges, John? You don't have to say specifically any judges. What was the role of a judge?
So you're probably thinking of some dude in a robe with a wig and a gavel, and I'm going to tell you, forget that right now, because that's not even close to what judge meant. The judges in this case were more like military tribal leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They were not kings. I will say they were not kings, but they were military leaders. Think of them as almost like generals.
They're generals. Their sole job was to keep the peace among the 12 tribes and to defend the grand land of Israel from outside invaders. But you do see in some parts of the Judges where you see many nations try to invade and take the land of Israel, because this was a very fertile land.
Oh, well, it was also along strategic trade routes. It was very valuable land.
Right. And so people wanted it, and that was the role of the judges. And they sort of they may have acted like the de facto leaders, some may say, but no. They did carry out and live according to the laws of God, at least for most of them they did. There are some instances they didn't, and they received punishment for it.
And the period of the judges, it's a very interesting time period. I love reading through the book of Judges for several reasons. One, it just shows the Israelites' absolute failure in keeping the commandments of God.
Mm-hmm.
Any command God gave them, they don't do. And this all culminates in the last couple of chapters of the book of Judges, where the Israelites actually have a civil war.
Mm-hmm.
A very gruesome and grotesque instance of gang rape leads to a civil war. And this just goes to show how far the Israelites had fallen. And this is where we really step into the time of the kings. So the Israelites decide to demand a king from Samuel, who is the last judge of Israel. Mm-hmm. And, Samuel's like, well, God's supposed to be our king. And yes, God is supposed to be their king. And God tells Samuel, look, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. Give them a king, but make sure they understand what's going to happen because they have rejected me. So we see Israel's first king, Saul, and Saul was everything Israel could have wanted in a king. He was fierce looking. He was, how do I explain this? Okay. If you're picking people for a sports team, Saul was the athlete star that you'd want.
He was the first one picked on the team.
Oh, yeah. He was this big, tough. He was described as being a head, shoulders taller than everybody else. He was this big, strong guy.
So that would put him around, I'd say 6.5 feet.
Somewhere around there. But does Saul do a good job?
No. And in fact, I will say, he did do a decent job. But unfortunately, after a while, power corrupts. And so Saul fell and fell hard.
Yeah.
But I will give him this. He did still turn to the Lord. He did not turn to other idols, at least under the grand scheme of things. He did not turn to idols and other gods.
No, but he did break his promise with God, and eventually he did blatantly break God's commandments by seeking out a soothsayer, a witch.
Yes.
And this is where, so Saul is removed, and this is where David comes onto the scene. And we all know David, and we all love David. And David's rule is, at first, so much better than Saul's. Mm-hmm. Leagues and leagues above Saul's rule. David is described as a man after God's own heart. Mm-hmm. David is this, if you could imagine a king that you would want if you were God's people, David's your man.
Mm-hmm.
But Dustin, what happens with David?
Just like I said earlier with Saul, power corrupts. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, David fell. He didn't fall hard, but he did fall, and he did break his promise and did not fulfill exactly what God wanted him to do. I mean, he killed a man, and he slept with a man's wife, and then had that man killed because he refused to sleep with her to prove that it was
couldn't cover it up.
Couldn't cover up the crime.
Yeah,
and ultimately he does pay the price, and that child dies.
Yes.
But one big thing, the big takeaway from David's story, from his entire life, he never saw other gods.
No, he never stopped seeking the Lord.
And that's why he's called a man after God's own heart. Not because he had this perfect relationship, but because he knew at the end of the day, he knew whose he was.
Yeah.
And so he needed to stay in there.
Yeah. So from here, of course, we enter the period of the divided kingdom after Solomon. So Solomon is David's son. He builds the temple. Solomon also falls by building pagan temples.
And having hundreds of thousands of women.
700 wives and 300 concubines. How do you manage, sir?
Oh, all the mother-in-laws. Oh.
That's the worst of it. Okay. Sorry. Sorry.
Okay. So now we're going, and so after this, we're going into the period of the prophets.
Yes, the divided kingdom. So let's look at Israel first, then we'll come back to Judah. What do you think?
Well, it ain't going to take that long.
Yeah, Israel. Does Israel do a good job?
No, Israel does not do a good job. It has the highest record of wicked kings. I mean, that's literally why people in the New Testament could not stay in Samaria. There was a literal reason.
Yeah, Israel, they completely turn their back on God. They follow, they have kings like Ahab and Joram. Yeah, all these wicked kings who continually, they just pull God's people towards paganism, towards idolatry, towards immorality. This is the time when Jezebel is queen. And eventually God's just had enough of it. And Israel is conquered by the Assyrians in about, I believe it is 722 BC. Mm-hmm. And in this time, they had many prophets to warn them, most famous being Elijah and Elisha. And Israel just does not listen. So going back, now we have Judah. And Judah is David's descendants. And Dustin, how does Judah do it first?
Well, Judah seems to do it does a better job than Israel, I will say. They did have some wicked kings that did break the covenants and break the laws of God, but they weren't at the level of the Israeli kings.
No.
Judah had its capital based in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was a part of the Judean kingdom.
Yes.
And so it did a fairly good job because it kept with pretty much when you keep the temple, you're keeping with God. And that's how they were. They really wanted to stay with God. And most of the kings did not turn away from God. In fact, they were very hesitant on doing so. I mean, you got a great example to the north of you of why you shouldn't disobey God.
Yeah, I mean, they had some wicked kings such as Ahaz and Manasseh. Mm-hmm. But then they also had wonderful kings such as Hezekiah and Josiah.
Exactly.
These are men who do call the nation back to God, but it doesn't last. And eventually Josiah's son Zedekiah breaks his oath to the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar comes along and just destroys Jerusalem. He burns down the temple of God, and he takes the Jewish people into exile. And again, throughout all this time, there are the prophets, such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea,
Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah.
You're just reading it off in order.
Nahum.
Okay, we get the point. But
there are a great many. And actually, let me go through. There's only a few more left. Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and that's really all the prophets.
Yeah. So these are men, and not all of those are before the exile. So now we enter the period called the exile, and this is 70 years in which the Jewish people are captive in Babylon. Mm-hmm. This is where we read about people like Daniel, men who during the Babylonian captivity, they still maintain their faith to God, and they continue their repentance to God. Mm-hmm. Keep going. Yeah, I've been talking a lot. It's your turn.
Well, the Jewish people stay faithful. A lot of them stay. Again, there's going to be some that are going to fall, and probably a lot of them did. But some of them stuck with the Lord. They didn't lose faith. I mean, imagine this: there is one church in your community, and almost all of you go to that same church, and all of a sudden that church is destroyed with its leadership. You are disheartened and demoralized. Mm-hmm. And so a majority of that community is going to be like, well, dang it. And this was not just any other place. This was the temple to God. This was the best. This was the place that everyone traveled to. And to have it just destroyed right in front of them. They were to say they're disheartened was a
understatement.
It was an understatement, and because for some of them they believed, or actually a lot of them that left the faith, I said, well, dang it, God's abandoned us now. This is a seal of what's to come, that we're not going to make it back from this one. We finally, the crap's finally hit the fan. We're done.
They've finally fallen too far, and that God had turned his back on them, is what they genuinely believe this.
And not all of them did.
No.
Some of them stood true to the faith and said, I'm standing firm right now. God did not abandon us. We did this to ourselves. And now we need to hold to the faith, and so that our future is secured.
Yes.
We will not accept the Babylonian beliefs. We will not accept their culture. We will live, we will wear their clothing, but that is all we will do. We will live in their communities, but that's as far as we will go. We will still live as Jews. We will not eat what they eat. We will live as we are commanded to live. We are going to make sure we are identified at the end of the day, that we can be separated easily from the Babylonians. We will not partake in what they do. We will worship the one true God. Yahweh, Jehovah. We will worship him. We will stay with him. We will do it in secret so that we do not risk our lives.
Yes.
And these are trying times. And, this is the underground church. This is the first point of the underground church.
Yes. Individuals such as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men who risk their lives solely because they want to maintain their faith in God.
What was their Hebrew names, John?
Why
come
do you gotta do that?
Come on, Mr. Quiz winner.
Why do you gotta do that to me? Okay, I remember Shadrach's and Abednego's, but I don't remember Meshach's Hebrew name.
All right, come on. All right, what were they?
Shadrach was Hananiah, and Abednego was Azariah, but I know Meshach started with an M.
Mishael?
Is that what it is?
Oh, no, that's Hananiah. Okay, so Hananiah with, hold on, what? Oh, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Okay, so Mishael was Meshach. Anyway, that was interesting. Okay, but anyway, eventually the exile period ends. The Babylonian Empire falls. The Persian Empire takes over. And Cyrus says, hey, guess what? You guys can go back to Jerusalem and rebuild your temple. And this is where the Jews are somewhat divided. Some of them do go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Some of them may remain in Babylon or in the Persian capital, such as Esther and Mordecai. And you can read about that in the book of Esther. And
look at that.
What?
I said, hey, look at that. She got a book named after her.
She did. Mm-hmm. And really, this is basically where the Old Testament ends. Throughout all this, the prophets are, placed, and you read about the Israelites coming back, and they rebuild the temple, they rebuild the wall, they rebuild their homes, they bring back the priests, they bring back the sacrifice, all these great things. And this is where the Old Testament ends. So what's the significance of all this, Dustin?
Well, John, you forget about the Psalms and the Proverbs.
Okay, I was doing the history. Like, the Psalms were Psalms are songs written by, like, David, Solomon, Moses.
John, I'm giving you a hard time.
Hey!
But I was trying to do an entire overview of the entire Old Testament. I wasn't just doing the history. So real quickly, so the Psalms and the Proverbs. Psalms was literally the songs written by King David, by Solomon, some even to be believed written by Moses. And these were songs to talk about the times. These are worship. These are songs of worship, songs of praise, songs of lament. These were songs that they attributed and written for God, because of God, and because what God was doing.
Yes.
Proverbs is
Think of it as your hymnal book.
Yes. Proverbs is written by, I believe, most of it, or if not all of it, was written by Solomon during
most of it.
And because when God asked Solomon, "What did you want?" And Solomon asked for wisdom to lead his people, and so this is what most of what he wrote down was during that period after he received his wisdom, so they can be recorded. And then we have Job, which most people know the story of Job. I'm not going to go too far into it. You see you see a man who worships God, and Satan takes it all away from him. Satan, who was given provision by God, was able to take it all away from him, just to see Job's reaction, to see if he was going to stay with God or if he was going to fall back with God, or come back to God. Then you have the Songs of Solomon, and I'm not going to go into that because I do not want to get a X-rated on this video. So if you want to do a little research on Song of Solomon, please do that yourself. I will not go into that.
There is nothing wrong with the Song of Solomon.
Lamentations is a book of lament. It is to cover the period of exile.
That's Jeremiah who wrote that, by the way.
Yes.
You forgot Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, you didn't talk about Ecclesiastes.
Well, somebody skipped over it.
Yeah. You were covering this. Anyway. Okay, so Ecclesiastes, real fast.
Go ahead.
No, it's your thing, man. You do it.
It's you. Go.
Okay. So Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon later on in life, and this is after his fall from grace. And this is during his return to his realization of, oh, I screwed up bad.
Yes.
And you can really read this. Like, it sounds like it was written by someone much older and wiser. You know, Proverbs seem like this very youthful expression of faith, whereas Ecclesiastes seems like the memoirs of an elderly man on his deathbed. Whoa.
All right.
Where did that come from?
Okay, so now that we are all caught up with the overview of the Old Testament, well, let's look. Is the Old Testament actually important for modern Christians?
Absolutely.
That answer, well, dang it, John, I was going to make a surprise out of it.
Oh, sorry.
The answer is, well, yes, absolutely, yes. The Old Testament would never have been kept in by the new Christians if it was not important for edification, for teaching and preaching. The Old Testament, if you don't have the Old Testament, the New Testament is just basically nothing. Because guess what? The other part of the prophetic books, it talked about the coming Messiah. It was called one who's going to come and save Israel, or what they believed to be just coming to save Israel. But as we know, and when we took a look at it, it wasn't speaking directly of Israel. It was speaking about all the people and all the nations. However, that's a critical part. That's, without the Old Testament, the New Testament is meaningless. The New Testament has nothing to stand on. And the same with the New Testament to the Old Testament, but we'll get to that next Sunday. We don't want to spoil that for you, but New Testament will be covered next Sunday.
Tune in.
Make sure you tune into that. But going back to the Old Testament, it is very, very important. It wasn't recorded for no reason. There's a lot of information that you can gain from the Old Testament. Now, is it applicable for salvation? No. And you mostly see that again. That'll be in next week's video.
We'll get into that next week.
But the Old Testament it's literally the root of the tree that will be sprung up in the New Testament.
Yes. Well, not only that, but the Old Testament also explains the issue. If there is no Old Testament, then there's no fall of man. If there's no fall of man, then there's no need for the New Testament, like Dustin said. We need the Old Testament. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Christians say, well, I don't like to read the Old Testament because of X, Y, or Z. And it's like, no, we need to read the Old Testament. It's important. Now,
do I like reading the Old Testament? No. I've read some stories that have really shocked me. But do I still believe that it's very important to read? Yes. It is always important to read.
I love reading the Old Testament. I do agree there are some times, again, like the incident I described from Judges, that was very uncomfortable to read.
And another incident where, never mind, I'm not going to get into that.
We're not going to. My point is, there are some, the point is that the Old Testament is necessary to read because it's where it's the foundation for the New Testament, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have much else I can add to it. I'm just going to tell, if you're a Christian, don't skip over the Old Testament. Don't, sure, looking through the list of names, this person was the father to this person, who was the father of this person, who was that can get a little, it can get a little drawn out sometimes, I will admit. But that doesn't mean it's not important. Of course it's important.
Absolutely. I mean, again, the Old Testament is the root of the tree that was sprung up in the New Testament. You need to have your roots founded before you can really start growing in your faith and understanding what salvation is.
Absolutely.
And also, need for salvation.
Yes. And also, and one more thing, the Old Testament is it segues directly into the New Testament because all of our major players in the New Testament, their foundation, again, is in the Old Testament. Their history is in the Old Testament. And we will cover that next Sunday.
Yes, we will. So stay tuned and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. If you like this video or you found some of our information to be confusing or not, or if you believe it's not to be correct, then please do not hesitate to let us know. We want to hear from you. We want to communicate with you guys. We want to hear your story. We want to hear your side of this because it's just me and John talking, so it can get a little boring. And we want to see you guys comment down below to see if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns about what we have said in these videos. So please take the time, go down below and comment. We do read them. Every time they pop up, we get little notifications on our phones. So please do comment down below, and we will answer them as quickly as possible.
All right. Have a great day, and God bless you guys.